again, everyone. Welcome back to Between the Shadows. This is Kristen.
This is Kara.
Thank you so much for coming back with us tonight. So this is going to be a pretty quick lead-in. Our last time we chatted, we talked about the introduction to 1795. Mm-hmm. Victoria Winters transported back to 1795. There was a rift in time because of the seance and a temporal shift, which put Phyllis Wick in 1967 and Victoria Winters in her place in 1795. Mm-hmm. We've pretty much met just about everyone there is to meet. We met most of the Collinses, and the Dupres have shown up at this point,
mm-hmm.
and
this is just when things are getting started.
Yes, this is the introduction, and this is where we get to the point where things start happening at Collinwood, and this is the beginning of that tragic time of 1795. Yeah. Josette and her father, Andre, have just arrived at Collinwood, and of course, the Countess Dupres, Natalie, is already there, and Angelique is already there, and mm-hmm. Barnabas has already broken her heart, so now she's on the warpath. She's out for blood. Yeah. So,
and they've arrived. Josette and her dad have arrived safe and sound,
mm-hmm.
just as Barnabas saw it. Vicky predicted, you know.
Mm-hmm. Angelique is the first to greet Josette. Like, Barnabas didn't even see her first. It was Angelique. She came in and, Mademoiselle, and they just start going back and forth in French. Nobody, we don't understand a word because I don't speak French. And Barnabas walks in and says, what a beautiful language, but not nearly as beautiful as you are. Yeah. And Barnabas and Josette, they're reunited and they're drunk in love. They're just, mm-hmm. they embrace and they kiss, and the whole time Angelique's standing off to the side watching with those big green jealous eyes, mm-hmm. and thinks to herself the audible thinking, hold him closer, mademoiselle, make the most of this moment. He mm-hmm. won't be yours much longer.
And then at that point, Angelique goes to her room, or she asks Josette.
Josette is like, is my room ready? She's like, well, then please go and pack my things. I think it was awkward having an onlooker. Yeah, yeah. Even though Josette had no idea what was really going through Angelique's mind. It was just, I want some alone time. I ain't seen him in 3 months, Yeah, right. So she takes this opportunity to go to her own room, and she begins to cast her first spell at Collinwood. Yeah. And she uses the member of the regiment, the little toy soldier, and Barnabas's handkerchief she puts the handkerchief around the doll's neck, and it causes Barnabas to choke. Yeah. And she does it like gradually. She doesn't just, puts the thing on and squeezes real tight. She's like, just a little bit first, and then gradually. A little more. Yeah. And then she squeezes that thing so hard that the doll actually comes up off the table while she's, squeezing the handkerchief. And mm-hmm. it's like, man, she is out to kill.
And that ends up putting Barnabas, in bed. Like, he's bedridden. Mm-hmm. Like, he's choking, basically, to death.
Right. I mean, he can't breathe. And Jeremiah comes rushing in and immediately, like, Barnabas, and starts undoing his buttons on his collar and his little scarf that he's wearing, and Vicky is also there. What happened? And Jeremiah, he's so concerned about Barnabas. I mean, I think he's concerned about Josette too, because Josette's freaking out. Mm-hmm. He tries to console her as much as possible, but it's obvious that his real concern is with Barnabas.
Right.
They're,
get out of my way, woman.
Yeah, it's like pretty much. And that's when Vicky kind of came to the rescue, and he was like, just take care of Josette, and takes him up to his room, and he keeps saying, Barnabas, you're going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It's all going to be over. Like, he's trying to will Barnabas to feel better. I think Jeremiah was just scared out of his mind. Right. And, they call a doctor to examine him, because he's choking. And the doctor says that physically Barnabas is fine. And there's nothing physically to explain why he's choking to death. Yeah. And he tells Jeremiah, I can't give him anything. And if he doesn't recover from this soon, he's going to die. Mm-hmm. He can't breathe.
Mm-hmm. And Vicky has a moment with Jeremiah like she had with Barnabas, mm-hmm. quote unquote, predicting the future, because, and she's like, he will be okay. He's not going to die. And
whatever the doctor says.
Kind of same as Barnabas. He's like, how do you know this? And you say it with such assurance that I believe you.
Right. But Jeremiah's a little more curt with her. He's like, what, you think you know more than a man of medicine? Yeah. And she's like, well, yeah, I guess I do. She's like, but there are just some things that I don't understand. And mm-hmm. and she tells him she doesn't understand why he was treating Barnabas the way he was treating him and the affection that he showed towards him. And this is where Jeremiah bites her head right off, just bites it off. Yeah. And he says, for a woman that's been here all of 2 days and has no previous knowledge of this family, you've gathered some strange and, might I add, rude impressions. Vicky is slowly remembering that she's a servant in the house. It's not like it is in 1967 where she's just a part of the family. She's a servant.
You are a servant, yeah.
And she kind of slinks back and she, forgive me, and I will not forgive you. It's like, Barnabas and I have always been very close. I'm his uncle, but we're the same age, and we've always been more like brothers, and I don't know where you conjured up these impressions, but I don't want to hear of it ever again.
Yeah.
And she goes to turn around, and he immediately I'm sorry, Yeah. And he's like, I'm angry because I can't do anything to help him, and it's just, it's obviously getting under his skin, and Vicky was the closest one, so she's the one who caught the brunt of that. So. Yeah.
Eventually, with all that, the beginning of Barnabas in bed, but as that's going on, Angelique, she's in her room still, and she finally makes an appearance and gets a glimpse of Barnabas and watches him as he slowly dies. And it freaks her out. Yeah. But it's kind of like, what did you expect?
Right.
I don't. What were you trying to do?
At first, she wasn't. She had that great big smile. She's like, "You brought this on yourself," and and she acts concerned. Josette's there and she's freaking out and she's crying and she even gets down on her knees to pray with Josette, and that's just completely laughable to me.
I know.
Because this powerful witch is praying, and I'm like, how did she not burn on the spot?
Right, for real. But that prompts Angelique, she has a couple of words with Barnabas. I don't know where Josette went. She went out
Josette left to get the medal of some saint that was going to help her pray.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when Angelique is left alone, and, she's got this audible thinking again and thinking, oh, you brought this on yourself, and maybe now you learn your lesson. And then she tells Barnabas, she's like, would you like to say something that I might like to hear? And it's like, the man is dying. Even a witch can understand that, right?
So Barnabas leans over to Angelique, and he's like, you got to help me. I'm going to die.
I'm going to die.
I'm going to die. And then all of a sudden it just seems to click in her head, well, what?
Yeah.
So she runs back to her room and takes the scarf off the soldier.
Well, she tries real hard. She
knotted it too tight.
This scene had me so panicked when she was trying to get that knot off the soldier. I think I held my breath the whole time, and then when she finally got it off, I was like,
yeah. And that was Barnabas's reaction as well.
Yeah.
He's like, it's better.
It's better.
It's better. And just all of a sudden, he's almost back on his feet immediately.
Yeah, and the doctor was like, this thing could stop as quickly as it started, and it did, because there was no real ailment. It was all a spell. Angelique chooses this moment to kind of change her tactic a little bit, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
So while this is all going on, or right after this, Victoria runs into Ben Stokes. And
that's right, Ben Stokes.
Yep, he's got her.
First time we see him, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it is, because he's sitting there and he's working in the fireplace, and she's talking to him, have you seen Sarah? And he's still got her back to him. He's like, oh, I don't know, probably the playroom, the nursery, and then he turns around and shows his face, and he's literally, because it's Thayer David, he's the spitting image of Matthew Morgan, and that freaks Victoria out.
Oh, yeah.
And she starts screaming, and he comes over and takes her by the shoulder. She's like, what's wrong? What did I do? And wrong moment, because Joshua Collins walked in.
Yeah.
And scolds Ben for engaging a woman of the house in conversation, and what did you do to her? And Vicky was like, no, he didn't do anything, it was me, it was all me. But Joshua's not listening, because he's very,
even as a servant, Ben, he was also, I guess, a convict.
He was.
But with Ben, we find out his background a little. He fought in the American Revolution, but it's unknown what his actual involvement was.
We just know that he fought in the war.
Right. And after the war, he was caught breaking into somebody's house and was arrested and was given a lengthy prison sentence. He claims that he was starving. After his prison sentence, he met Joshua Collins, whom made him work in Collinwood to work off the rest of his prison term.
Yes.
So, he's an ex-convict and a servant. So it's zero respect.
Yes, and
zero respect.
Double whammy there. And the thing is it's kind of implied that Ben kind of had some PTSD after the war.
Yeah.
And he was hungry and he was starving, and that's why he broke in to get food. And, because of that, he went to prison over it. And, Joshua Collins, he was not a kind man to Ben, not by any means.
No.
And Ben even said that Joshua just thinks up ways to be cruel to a man like Ben. And for me, I think Joshua Collins, he was very much of the opinion that he was better than Ben because he had wealth, and Ben was a lowlife and a criminal.
Yeah.
And I think he very much believed that servants and people below him had no chance of rising above their station and making a better life for themselves. And he proved this later on when Angelique and Barnabas are supposed to be married, Angelique's a maid, a servant.
Right.
And he tried to buy her off, and she was like, I'm not going to do that,
Right.
Joshua tells Vicky that he doesn't trust a man like Ben and must rule him with an iron fist. And Barnabas and Jeremiah were much more kind to Ben. Yeah. Like, Barnabas was even teaching him how to write, you know. And they were of the opinion that, Ben just came home from the war and he probably was hungry. He probably wasn't just breaking in arbitrarily here, Yeah. And
I love that Barnabas later tells Ben that when he and Josette are married, that Ben is to stay with him.
Yeah.
And not go with Joshua to the big
Barnabas
house.
a servant. And he was like, you can work out your prison sentence with me. I don't see any reason that you can't do that. And Ben is just ecstatic over it because he likes Barnabas. Barnabas has been kind to him.
And it shows us, again, who Barnabas was, before
the vampire.
We were, and very kind-hearted. Like Jeremiah. Barnabas even says that he looks so much up to Jeremiah.
Oh, yeah.
Even, yes, they are the same age, but almost maybe like a father figure in a way, because just the kindness and that he doesn't get from his own father.
Well, that's why they say, they're like brothers instead of, uncle and nephew. They're about the same age, and it's
Jeremiah's kind of like a big brother.
Yeah.
So
I think so.
So I like that. I love that. He's like, you're going to stay with me.
Right.
He's like, when we get married, you're not going to go. You're going to stay with me.
I love it too. That. During all of this, Joshua mentions to Vicky that Millicent Collins is coming with her younger brother Daniel for the wedding, and it is expected that Jeremiah is to marry Millicent, and there will be 2 weddings at Collinwood. And Jeremiah and Millicent were an arranged marriage. We were talking about arranged marriages in the last episode, and Jeremiah was not keen on the idea, not by any means.
Yeah.
And
were they like second cousins or cousins?
I think they're second cousins, maybe. Anyway, they were cousins. Both their last names were Collinses. That's how close they were. So, but this was 1795, and that was a thing. I mean, Queen Victoria married her cousin too. So we got to remember that Jeremiah has already had a wife. His wife was Laura Murdoch Collins. And
we don't get to see it.
We don't see this, not in this period. We learn about it later on. But he's already had a wife, and he's like, I don't want to marry. I don't want to marry someone who, I don't love. But the men are marrying for love nowadays, and Joshua's still like, arranged marriages all the way, the lucrative part for everybody. And that's exactly what he's doing with Millicent, because Millicent's parents died, and Millicent inherited everything, and she was very wealthy. Yeah. And Joshua wanted in on that wealth, and he even told Jeremiah, I can't believe you're ready to let this wealth slip through the Collins' fingers, and he was like, I don't want to. But Vicky gives herself away, and she says, Millicent never married. And Joshua's like, what? But she plays it off again, oh, well, I read a book and a girl named Millicent, and she never married. And Joshua's like, okay. But like we said before, she is learning more and more that everything she knew about the Collinses, it's not grounded in truth by any means. Right. So continuing with the Jeremiah and Millicent, Vicky tells Jeremiah that maybe she feels like she's come to this time to change things, because she's realizing that all of this is a lie. So maybe I'm supposed to be here to change stuff, And Jeremiah,
it's a very risky thought.
Definitely. And why would you say that to someone,
Yeah.
But anyway, but Jeremiah says that things have already changed because she's here. She's already there. And even though he hasn't the faintest idea of what he actually means, I mean, she's not even supposed to be there. And he's just talking, oh, by fate, you were here instead of the other woman. And he has no idea what that means, And he was like, why do I feel you well enough to tell you that? And he says that he rarely says anything like that to anyone. And he feels like they've known each other some other time and place. Now, I got off on a wild tangent when I saw this, because I started thinking, could it be that Burke Devlin is actually the reincarnation of Jeremiah Collins? And he did bear a striking resemblance to him, and even if he wasn't, I would have maybe liked to have seen something between Jeremiah and Victoria. They had instant chemistry the second they met, and Jeremiah never treated her like she was a servant. He always spoke to her like he was speaking to a woman,
It goes back to that very first time Burke, Jeremiah, when Jeremiah first saw Vicky, like he was the kindest. Like
yes.
Burke, And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. He's like, no, don't be sorry. There's no reason to be sorry.
I dare say he was more kind to her than Barnabas was, and Barnabas was very kind to her. But Barnabas was like, I don't know you, sorry, I don't know you. And Jeremiah's like, come here, I got you, you know.
Barnabas learned to be kind from the best.
Yes.
I'll put it that way.
Exactly. And, I mean, they had, Jeremiah and Vicky, they had quality and good conversations, and I feel like this certainly could have led to more between them.
Yeah.
It's just one of those what ifs for me. What ifs for me. And
what if stories are great.
I love the what ifs, you know. I love time travel and the parallel time and all that. Oh, it's my favorite. I love it.
Yeah.
And, you know, Jeremiah tells her he doesn't want to marry Millicent, and she tells him Millicent's not going to marry. You know, she gives herself away again. And Joshua enters again and treats her like a servant and says that now that Daniel's here, her work's going to double and she'll have very little time for herself.
Yeah.
And Jeremiah was like, that was mean and totally unnecessary. And this is when he again tells Jeremiah, you're being a fool and you're going to marry Millicent. And Jeremiah's like, no, I'm not, you know. But so that's what's going on with that. Barnabas is engaged to Josette. Joshua is trying real hard to get Jeremiah to marry Millicent. And this is when we go back to Angelique because she's changed her tactic.
And this is when she engages Ben Stokes and makes Ben her slave.
Yep.
And I hate this. I hate this for Ben.
I do too.
It's so torturing to watch, honestly. But she makes him unable to tell anybody about her being a witch. And the things that she is doing. Like anytime he just tries to start saying Angelique or whatever, like he just chokes up and can't talk.
Yeah.
He does try to tell Barnabas what is happening, and sure enough, he loses his voice when he tries to speak Angelique's name. And so many attempts he tries.
Yeah, and she's like, well, I'll give you your voice. Like, he even comes up after he's lost his voice, and he's got those big old bear paw hands, you know, getting ready to choke her, and she stops him, you know, just with a flick of her wrist, you know. So he realizes there's no point in denying her. This is good. This is going to be my life, you know. And so she commands Ben, you know, go out into the woods, find me an unbroken spider web to help me cast my next spell. And then she tells him, go into Jeremiah's room, get his ring and a piece of his hair. And basically she makes this little dress out of a voodoo doll made of Josette's handkerchief, Jeremiah's hair, and the spider web. And the spider web is supposed to be the cobweb of love, she says. Okay. And it's supposed to make Josette fall in love with Jeremiah. It wasn't her plan originally to make the two of them fall in love.
Yeah.
It was just to make Josette so obsessed with Jeremiah and get it to where she's totally madly in love with him, and even so far to the point, you know, to go to Jeremiah and I love you and confess her love, you know. For me, this was just a little bit petty of Angelique. I mean, Josette isn't the one who broke her heart.
Yeah.
But because she's the one that has won the love of Barnabas, she's the one that Angelique chooses to attack.
Yeah.
But I think she got a little spooked after Barnabas almost died after her last spell. But she wants Josette to feel the way Barnabas made Angelique feel.
Right.
And she wants Jeremiah to go to Barnabas and tell him that Josette loves him and came to him so that he'll stop loving her. You know?
Josette loves Jeremiah.
Yes, Josette loves Jeremiah over and over. And so the second spell that Angelique casts with Josette is Josette gets a headache. And Angelique uses her special rose water cologne and massages Josette's head with it. And Angelique's added some kind of potion to aid her in this spell to love Jeremiah. And sure enough, later on, she does go to Jeremiah's room in the middle of the night and confess her love for him. And he shakes her out of it and says, you love Barnabas. And she kind of shakes out of it and runs out. Yeah. You know.
And now Jeremiah, after that, he's sitting in his room brooding and toiling over whether or not to tell Barnabas what happened. And Angelique tells him she is exactly the same, and he comes to the decision that he has to tell him.
Yeah, she's like, oh, Josette hasn't changed since she got here. She's exactly the same as she was in Martinique, you know?
Yeah.
And Jeremiah was like, okay, so she is pulling the wool over his eyes. She's totally lying to him. I gotta tell him, you know?
Yeah.
Jeremiah gets to Barnabas's room, and he can see how much Barnabas loves her. Like, Barnabas just starts gushing over her. Hey, did you see the way her hair falls this way? Do you see the way she picks up this? And just talks about how beautiful she is and how much she loves him, and questions why she chose him. He tells Barnabas that maybe he doesn't know Josette as well as he thinks. Yeah. And Jeremiah ends up chickening out and tells him, just don't let anything or anyone come between you. That's all he says.
Right.
And doesn't tell Barnabas what happened.
So. Which, that moment, because it was Jeremiah saying it to Barnabas, it just added to the betrayal feel later on.
Oh my gosh.
And just remember that moment when the betrayal, quote unquote, comes. And it was that moment that
hurt so bad. I felt the pain, man.
Yeah, I flashed back to this moment when the moment with the duel came.
Yes.
So, but of course, Angelique's never really satisfied.
No, she has been listening at the door, and Ben's like, yeah, he didn't tell him.
Yeah. So she again changes her tactic and her spell. Mm-hmm. She decides to put a potion in Jeremiah's hot toddy or whatever he's drinking.
Hot toddies are awesome, by the way. I love those things. Especially when you got a bad cold. Oh, man.
Right. But it's supposed to have the same effect and have him fall in love with Josette, too. Mm-hmm. So the feeling's mutual and stronger.
Yes.
For her plan to work.
Yes.
Before this, Jeremiah confronts Josette and asks her what in the hell she was thinking when she came to his room the night before, and Josette is completely distraught and says she doesn't know what she was doing and that she does love Barnabas, mm-hmm. and that she would rather kill herself than hurt him. Mm-hmm. And so
the scene is so funny when she turns to walk back in the house, she with her hair, and just I think it was totally
unintentional,
but she swats Jeremiah in the face with her curls in the back of her hair. It's just funny. I noticed that the last time, and it made me laugh a little bit.
And you notice, I think she maybe walks by a mirror or something, and mm-hmm. she just can't even stand the sight of herself.
Yeah.
Without feeling agony
and guilt and betrayal and the whole thing about this, these two, when the spell finally works and they run off and get married, they can't believe what they've done, but it's like they can't help themselves. They're quote unquote madly in love, mm-hmm. but the betrayal they feel. Yeah. I mean, that, seeing Barnabas in agony because he's been betrayed, but seeing these two, why did we do this? What have we done?
Yeah.
It just, it's heartbreaking. It's gut-wrenching. So she can't stand the sight of her own reflection, and the next scene, she asks her very self-involved aunt, Miss Natalie Dupres, mm-hmm. she's like, I need a favor, and she says, better than to ask someone as selfish as I for a favor.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like, well, at least you admit it. Mm-hmm. At least you admit it. But she wants Natalie to accompany Barnabas to the cabinet maker to see about some furniture they're going to have after they're married. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I love Josette very much. I love her character, and I love the way that she looks at Barnabas and the love that she seems to feel for him. I love Josette. She's one of my favorite characters, but that being said, I think she's spoiled rotten.
Oh, yeah.
I think Josette is spoiled rotten, and she's spoiled by her father and by her aunt. Her mother died, I think, in a hurricane or something. Like some kind of natural disaster like that. It took the life of her mom. So I think that probably helped. This is Andre Dupres' one and only daughter, and Natalie Dupres' one and only niece. And so she's very pampered and very spoiled, and her family's very wealthy. So I think that she's just almost to the point of expecting both of them, and even Barnabas, just to do whatever she wants.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't even come down and have lunch with him when he came home to eat. He came home from the office to have lunch, and Josette was like, I just don't want to, And it was just a little bit spoiled brat for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And at this point, the Countess suspects something is wrong, but Josette won't talk about it. She's very uneasy when Natalie talks about Jeremiah.
Mm-hmm. Isn't he handsome? And she's like, no. And the Countess says, well, that's just because you're so in love with Barnabas. If you weren't in love with him, then Jeremiah would totally be handsome. So.
And Barnabas comes in at this point and tells Josette that he hasn't seen her all day, and he wonders if this is an indication of how their married life is going to be.
Yeah.
And she won't speak to him and runs out of the room. Mm-hmm. All dramatic.
Barnabas wasn't even cruel to her. He was just teasing her. He's like, is this an indication of how our married life's going to be? And she just kind of looks at him, I think guilt-stricken again, and just runs out of the room.
Yeah. And Natalie assures him that it's just nerves because she's about to be a bride, but she doesn't come down for dinner either.
Yeah.
And Barnabas is upset about not seeing her.
Right. So Barnabas is all sorts of upset. He's concerned, and he's upset about not seeing Josette, and he's standing in the drawing room, kind of pacing back and forth the way he was when he was waiting on her ship.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Jeremiah and Natalie, they're doing their best to just to ease distress. You know, Angelique standing off in the wings and tells Ben, now's the time, go put the potion, you know. And it's Toddy while the three of them are having a drink in the drawing room, and they're going back and forth and talking about their wealth. Well, you're wealthy, and well, you're more wealthy, and you know, this is what you decide. You just decide the drink that you have and whatever. You know, it's just a lot of rich people banter, I guess. You know, there is a scene that's just a little bit humorous for me, and it shows the fondness between Natalie and Barnabas. Jeremiah has he's getting ready to leave because he needs to go get some air, and Natalie sends Barnabas away because she says, I don't like being with men who sit with me when he'd rather be somewhere else. It's too obvious, you know. I love Natalie. She's wonderful. And Barnabas smiles at her and says, Countess, if I love Josette for no other reason, it's because you are her aunt.
And Natalie is in her room. I guess she's in the drawing room. She's in the drawing room. She's playing her game of cards by herself, and Josette comes down.
Wants to go for a walk.
She wants to go for a walk, get some air or whatever. And you know, Natalie, she's always got to, no, don't go out at night, don't go after dark, you know. She's always got to put up a fight, but lets her have her way eventually. But she secretly follows her out into the night, and she finds her and Jeremiah together on the terrace. And she overhears Jeremiah confessing his love for Josette, and they embrace and kiss.
And that's like end of episode. And then the next scene, the opening scene, is Natalie's on the terrace by herself, and Andre comes walking up, and she's like, look, I gotta tell you. And she's like, we're in the presence of an evil spirit at Colin. He's like, oh, Natalie with this again, you know. And she's like, no, really. She's like, somebody is trying to break up this marriage. Somebody is trying to stop this marriage of
Josette and Barnabas.
And he was like, but why? He was like, the Collinses have everything to gain from this marriage. Why would they want to break it up? You know, she's like, I didn't say it was one of the Collins family. I just think that there's someone at Collinwood who's trying to break up this marriage.
And then she proceeds to tell him what she saw the previous night with Josette and Jeremiah.
And of course, Andre's like, are you sure? Are you sure that's what did they say? She's like, she said that she loved him and they kissed, you know?
And they kissed.
So Andre's like, you know what? Holt, stand here. I'm going to go take care of this. And he marches off to Collinwood. He's like, I'm going to go take care of this myself, you know? So, friends, I think that right there is probably where we'll stop for tonight. The next few episodes, it's one thing right after the other, like we said. So, we want to have some time to talk about that as well. So, before we go, we just want to say thank you for joining us tonight. Thanks for letting us talk about more Dark Shadows. This is such a good time. I love talking about this. So just a friendly reminder, we are now on YouTube, and all of our episodes can be found there as well. So head over and like and subscribe. That helps us out quite a bit. Our email is still the same, betweenthe2021@gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook. We see your messages. We try to be very prompt with those. Just reach out, Dark Shadows fans. We love you all. Thanks for your support and your comments and your feedback.
Until next time, guys, we'll just keep it between us and the shadows. Good night.
Good night, everyone. The oil from Jeremiah's ring, the oil from his skin, will bind his hair into a belt for the cobweb of love. The cobweb of love will trap Josette, and the strands of the web will be as iron. There, it's done. Josette loves Jeremiah. Josette loves Jeremiah. Josette loves Jeremiah. You've been listening to Between the Shadows, a Dark Shadows podcast. All original Dark Shadows music, video clips, images, and media are the sole property of Dan Curtis Productions and is only used to promote Dark Shadows and should not be distributed, copied, or reproduced.